Hey Pokemon fans, Tamashii here. One of my favorite things about the Pokemon franchise is its huge cast of extremely interesting characters, many of whom happen to be villains. All across the board, from the games to the anime to the manga, even to the spin-off games. There are baddies big and small, silly and serious, and today I'm going to celebrate my favorites by counting down my top 10 favorite Pokemon villains. Let's get started with a number 10 pick, Bill and Cassidy. Though by now Jessie, James, and Meowth are hands down my favorite characters in the anime, they're not exactly good enough at what they do to be considered villains, so unfortunately I wouldn't feel right putting them on this list. Instead, I think their rivals at Team Rocket, Botch and Cassidy, are just competent enough at what they do to be considered actual baddies. While most of Jessie and James' schemes end in them being beaten so badly that they go blasting off, Biff and Cassidy are often successful enough to be apprehended by the police, and as such are more of a threat. In fact, they're even recognized by Giovanni as one of the highest ranked teams in the entire organization, and Dr. Namba even entrusts them with the capture of a legendary Pokemon. However, their competence is really only impressive when compared to Jessie and James, as on their own, they're still often outsmarted by Ash, which is pretty embarrassing, and also why I'm putting them so low on the list. Still, as a kid, whenever we played Pokemon, my friends and I would always pretend to go up against Buster and Cassidy rather than Jessie and James. So for how little they were on the show, they made a big impact. Number 9. Lawrence III. The movie 2000 has always been a favorite of mine. Possibly because I'm a closet Poke shipper, but also because it's just a really epic story. Legendary Pokemon duking it out over control of 3 islands, all with the chance of destroying the entire world in the process. And what better to set this all in motion but one douchey guy's massive fanboyism and greed. Lawrence III is such a huge Pokemon nerd that he basically has to have every actual Pokemon mint in box for his collection, that I assume only he ever views because he lives in a flying museum all by himself. Maybe he posts about his finds on LiveJournal, I don't know. In a way, though his obsessive collecting hinges on silly, really it kind of exposes a darker side to all Pokemon fandom. At what point does catching them all become catching too many? In the end, though his collection is destroyed, he vows to begin again. And as a collector myself, that's almost kind of inspiring, if not a little creepy. Number 8. Mirror B. That style, that flair, who else could it be but Mirror B? Though the main villains of the GameCube Pokemon titles are interesting and unique in their own right, none is more memorable than the Disco King himself. His theme music, his flamboyant outfit, that Pokefro, and of course those moves set him apart from all the rest. He's actually one of 4 Cypher admins, and probably the least threatening of the bunch overall, being the only one without a legendary Pokemon. Then later he sets up his own team with 2 lackeys called Team Mirror, but never accomplishes much. He's really more concerned with dancing than fulfilling his villainous duties, but his popularity earned him a special role in XD Gale of Darkness, and without the right team members, his army of salsa dancing Ludicolo can be tricky to take down. So even though he might have only had a small hand in any criminal activity, his larger-than-life personality has earned him a spot on this list. Let the music play. Number 7. Gengar. The Mystery Dungeon series is beloved for its story more than most any main series Pokemon game. And admittedly, I'm not one of the series' many fans. But I do happen to know that my good friend Jimmy, also known as Nintendo Fan for the Win, is. So I figured it's only fitting to have him on to talk about the number 7 spot.
Of all the Pokemon villains, Gengar is one of the most intriguing. We're led to believe by the Pokemon games and anime that Pokemon aren't evil by instinct. It's the trainer that commands them to do evil things. With the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games, there are no trainers, so the role of the main antagonist falls onto a Pokemon. In the original duo of games, Red and Blue Rescue Teams, you play as a human that has been transformed into a Pokemon. Later, you learn of the Ninetales legend. If you yank one of Ninetales' 9 tails, you will be cursed. The NPC Pokemon are filled in on your quote-unquote secret past by Gengar, and you're eventually run out of town. It is later revealed that Gengar is the cursed human, and you, the player, were brought to this world to correct the damages and natural disasters plaguing it. Long ago, Gengar grabbed one of Ninetales' tails. His Gardevoir protected him and took the curse upon herself. Gengar fled the scene and was told that one day he'd be reborn as a Pokemon. In the post-game, Gengar shows remorse for his actions and wants to go to the Murky Cave to save Gardevoir from the curse. Although Gengar has the mind of a human, it flips a lot of the morals that the Pokemon games have instilled right back onto their heads. Thank you, Tamashii, for including me in this video, and I hope you'll stick around for the rest of it because I know it's going to be really great.
Number 6. Colorist. Colorist is interesting because his loyalty lies with whoever has the correct answer, not the person giving the orders. He is a man of science, out to discover how to bring out the full potential of Pokemon. And whether that's being merciless and using brute force, or working together with Pokemon, all he wants is to find the most efficient method. Ultimately, when the player shows him that it's a combination of eugenics and a careful distribution of effort values, Colorist ditches Team Plasma and leaves Getz to deal with you himself. To me, the scariest type of villain is the kind you can't trust, and Colorist is just the sort of self-serving mad scientist I wouldn't want to meet. Number 5. Archie and Maxie. These two share a spot because their roles are so intertwined or interchangeable depending on whether you're playing Ruby and Sapphire or Emerald. What I like about these two is that they so carefully tread the line between sincere and batshit insane. They truly believe their actions will make the world a better place, and are willing to sacrifice the lives of half the region's people in Pokemon in order to benefit the other half, simply because they believe what they're doing is right. And what's more, upon achieving their goals, witnessing their visions slowly become a reality makes them realize what horrible mistakes they've made, going into such shock that they can't even take responsibility for their actions or try to reverse them, letting saving the world fall on the player. Of all major game villains, these two team leaders are by far some of the most interesting to me, because they are the most sympathetic. They never mean to do any harm, they just labor under the false notion that what they're doing is the best thing for Pokemon kind. It takes some careful writing for villains to want to do such horrible, senseless things, and yet at the same time you never feel like they're bad people. Number 4. Lance. I have a bit of a thing for villains with sympathetic motives. So much like Archie and Maxie, Lance ended up on this list for similar reasons. Lance's goal is to eliminate all human life on the planet, so that nobody can be cruel or use Pokemon wrongly ever again. He's essentially Team Plasma before it was cool, and also to more of an extreme, and without the false pretenses. Also, much like the leaders of Team Aqua and Magma, once his grand scheme is thwarted, he seems to have a change of heart, and helps the protagonist of the manga out behind the scenes here and there. I wish I could tell you more about him, but I'd hate to spoil the entire Yellow arc, so let's just say Lance has a pretty unique backstory with some interesting powers. Lance is the ultimate anti-hero. He might seem evil at first, what with the plans to wipe out the whole human race and all, but he's really not such a bad guy. A friend to Pokemon, a frenemy to humans, Lance puts the N in Dragon Master. Number 3. Getz. I'll admit, the first time I played through Black and White, Getz turning out to be evil and having aspirations of world domination actually made me angry. So angry, in fact, that I decided I hated the entire game then and there, and rushed through all the dialogue beyond that point because I didn't care about the story anymore. It wasn't until a recent replay, with the perspective of already knowing Getz's true motivations, and having beaten Black and White 2, that I gave the game a fair chance. And I was not disappointed. It's really a fantastic story, even if it's not quite the one I wanted them to tell, and it's definitely one of the most interesting plots for world domination yet in a Pokemon game. I still probably would have liked Getz more if they took the sympathetic route and just made him a more extreme version of N, but the fact that N exists at all actually makes Getz more palatable. N acts as a counterbalance, a sympathetic character who truly believes in what Team Plasma says it wants, which makes a nice contrast to the black-hearted Getz. I would put N on this list instead, but N just isn't evil. He's not a villain, he's just a person trying to do what he believes is right. So in spite of my distaste for the money-grubbing, greedy, cliché, power-hungry bad guy, it's Getz who gets the number 3 spot. Number 2. Pokemon Hunter J. J is a bit of a novelty, in that she's actually kind of hardcore for the villains that tended to show up in the anime. Pokemon Hunter J is a sort of a Pokemon thief for hire, stealing owned Pokemon or poaching wild Pokemon for clients. And she has her own henchmen and even an airborne base. Unlike most villains who are directly thwarted by Ashen Pals, usually J gets away with her crimes, and instead it's her clients or henchmen that get caught. What really sets her apart from your standard anime crook is that aside from just trying to get rid of Ash and his friends as pesky pursuers, she actually tries to kill him several times, trying to burn him alive, hyper beam him to death, crush him, and throw him from great heights. And I thought I wasn't his biggest fan. Jeez. Also noteworthy is the fact that she herself gets an implied offing at the end of her run, when her airship crashes into Lake Valor in a heist gone wrong, and gets sucked into a whirlpool while her and her entire crew are still on board. The last we see of her is her cracked visor floating in the water as her ship sinks in the background. That's dark. And the number 1 Pokemon villain is Mewtwo. The number 1 spot belongs to not a human, but a Pokemon. Mewtwo wasn't born evil. In fact, he wasn't really born at all, but created by Mr. Fuji in a laboratory on Cinnabar Island. Mewtwo was created as a clone of Mew in a project funded by Giovanni, but Mr. Fuji really wanted to follow through with the project as a means to recreate his late daughter, Amber. Mewtwo and Amber 2, and a few other clone Pokemon grew up together in test tubes, communicating telepathically, and becoming very close friends. However, the clones of Ambertwo and the other Pokemon were unstable, and eventually they faded away. Mewtwo was so distraught over the loss of his best friends, particularly Ambertwo, that he nearly destroyed the laboratory with his psychic powers, but he was quickly put to sleep by the scientist. From then on, Mewtwo was basically the existential crisis Pokemon. Very powerful, very smart, and very aware that he was created by humans for a specific purpose, one that he resents. His overwhelming angst is so severe that upon waking up again he actually did destroy the laboratory, used Giovanni to help him hone his powers, and then escaped and created his own floating fortress, complete with an army of clones and a brainwashed human Nurse Joy slave. In the dubbed version of the movie, he simply wants to prove that his clones are better by making all of them fight with their natural-born counterparts, and get revenge on the humans that created him by destroying the world with a hurricane that he created. The original Japanese version has a much more complicated and kind of iffy conflict about the morality of cloning in itself, but that's a discussion for another video. In the end, Mewtwo is not defeated, but simply reasoned with, and Mewtwo decides to move all of his clones to an island in Johto where they can all live in peace. That's really one of the coolest and most distinguishing things about Mewtwo. Unlike all the other Pokemon villains, he is never ever beaten. Not even dented, really, and he doesn't ever become good either. Mewtwo never stops resenting humanity, he just learns to tolerate them. He is, from the start, and he remains, an unconquerable and uncontrollable force to be reckoned with. Ultimately, his only check is his own search for meaning in his life, and that's a pretty powerful thing in and of itself. So there you have it, my top 10 Pokemon villains. Do you have a favorite bad guy or gal that didn't make this list? Leave me a comment and let me know. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to click here to subscribe for more Pokemon videos. See ya!